Start anytime. If anybody else misses it, we can always send them the recording.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Got a fancy PowerPoint slide presentation. Okay, everybody should see. It says Western Lane Ambulance District and Siuslaw Valley Fire and Rescue Budget Committee orientation and my laser pointer. So welcome to our my first budget committee orientation. I've been here almost 2 years now. We've never done this before. And actually had a request from one of my directors that I should have a director orientation because we use so many abbreviations and acronyms and we talk different things. And then when we get into the budget world, that's a completely different language for me. God bless CPAs, but they're evil people with the language they've come up with, I think. And no offense if anybody's a CPA, I love them, but it is a different language. So this has really helped me as well just to reinforce what we need to do with the budget, what we do, and how we do it, and why we do it. And in fact, if you ever want to, the state offers a series of classes. There's 4 classes on budget preparation for local governments. I take it every year, all 4 classes, because it's just, and I learned something new, and it's great instructors. So if you ever want to do that, we'd be happy to hook you up with that. It's they have limited a number of spots for the classes. They're by Zoom, and it fills up quick. I know they just added a class, so if you're interested in something like that, we can certainly hook you up for that.
I think they did record them, so they might be available at the Oregon Department of Revenue website. I can look into that.
You know, they did. I saw that on their website, so you're correct, Dina. So that is available. Okay, let's see if I can get this to advance. There we go. First of all, I want to say thank you for being on our budget committee. That is very important. The one take-home you should probably get from this presentation is that citizen involvement is extremely important for us. I mean, not only is it mandated by state law, but it really helps us. I mean, make sure that we're going down the right path, that we're open, and state's very adamant that the public must be involved, or at least very aware of decisions made concerning the budget. But even as important is how those decisions were made. So thanks again for being part of our budget committee. It's not going to be, you got somebody trying to get in?
I'll get them in.
Cool, thank you. So it's important for the committee to understand that your opinions are important and your vote counts as much as anyone else on the committee. So with that, we'll go.
Was that you, Marvin?
Oh.
Hey.
You're a budget expert. This is going to be a review for you, but that's okay.
My Alzheimer's, I need a review.
Don't we all? Yeah. So tonight I'm just going to cover some basic concepts of our budget process, just including some, we'll get into some basic ideas like what does the budget committee do? And then we'll look into budget cycle or budget calendar. And then we'll go over some budget examples of what to expect when you see our budget. You're not going to see our budget tonight. We're not going to talk about any of our budgets, either SVFR or Western Lane. We can't do that. And that goes back to anytime we talk about the budget, it's got to be in a public meeting. So they want to know not only final decisions and the final budget, they want to know how you came up to get those decisions. So everything has to be public. So let's talk a little bit about the law. So most local governments must prepare. I say most because not all local governments have to, and there's a small list of those that don't. Typically, if you're not collecting taxes, and maybe might be some other requirements, you don't have to have a formal adopted budget. We do collect taxes, both agencies, and in general. Whatever I talk about tonight is going to apply for SVFR and Western Lane Ambulance District. There's 1 or 2 things that are different, and I'll point those out. But if you have any questions, feel free to speak up. but most governments have to have a budget, and it has to be either an annual budget or a biannual budget. I think the city does a biannual budget, and I'm not sure how I think you just make a choice to do that, but we do an annual budget. We have to follow standard procedures for preparing, presenting, and administering the budget, and we'll go over some of that. And like I said, it requires citizen involvement. And I'm not going to go into what a budget, everybody knows what a budget is. Our fiscal year is July 1 through June 30th, and that's what we're getting prepped for right now. So who is on the budget committee? Of course, we have citizens at large, and again, thank you all for being on our budget committee. It's the board of directors, so we have 5 directors and 5 at-large citizens. So each district, SVFR and Western Lane, has 10 people that are on their budget committee. And that's why we don't meet together, because that would be 20 people, and that would be way too many to try and handle. So we do 10 for each. Citizens are appointed, as each of you were, and serve 3-year terms, and they're staggered, so we never have, the entire group of citizens coming again. So again, thanks for being on our budget committee. So the budget committee is the district's fiscal planning advisory committee, and that's an important distinction. You say, well, no, we're going to approve the budget for the district, and that is true. That is the role, the primary role of the budget committee. But it's through that process that you're advising the board of directors, the 5 directors, on what you feel should go into the budget or maybe not go into the budget, and just give advice along those lines. So our budget committee members paid for their work. That's an easy one. No, unfortunately, you cannot receive any compensation for serving as committee members. If it was up to me, we would give you lots of money for doing this, because I know sometimes it's boring and hard work. But state law says no, you can't be compensated. You'll have our undying gratitude, which you can't sell, but it still means a lot to us. So again, you're stuck for 3 years. So we appreciate you being with us for 3 years. And there is one officer, a presiding officer, chairperson is required, and we'll do that. We'll select that at the first board meeting. Does not have to be a director; it can be a citizen. I know last year for Western Lane Ambulance District, John Murphy was the chairperson, and then for SVFR, I believe Marvin Tipler was our president. So if a citizen wants to be a chairperson, that's perfectly okay. There's not a whole lot that needs to be done. Chairperson tries to get the meeting moving, and we certainly assist with that if there's any issues. Okay. So main function of the budget committee: to review, discuss, make additions or deletions, and approve the proposed budget presented by the budget officer. And we'll talk about the budget officer in a second. And all these definitions, I'm just taking these right out of training material from the state. So I didn't do this all on my own. Well, I put it on the slides. And there are a couple good documents, local budgeting manual for the state of Oregon. We can certainly make those available to anybody that wants to read those. So you will meet publicly, and again, it's very important. It has to be a public meeting to review, discuss, make additions or deletions, and then approve the budget. And I can't emphasize enough, committee meetings are open to the public, and they must be open to the public. A quorum is required to conduct committee business, so we have 10 members, so our quorum is going to be 6. It doesn't matter how many people show. Hopefully everybody shows up to our committee meeting, but our majority is always 6. So if only 6 show up and 4 can't make it for whatever reason, all 6 would have to vote for something to pass it. So hopefully, and when we go over to the schedule, you'll know in advance when we're having the meetings, of course. And if you can't make one, let us know. We have some flexibility in setting dates, and the meetings typically aren't really long, and we try and move them along. But a majority is required to approve any motion. So the final thing the budget committee will do is to make a motion to approve the budget, and then it'll go to a vote. And if we get 6 votes in favor, then that will go to the board for adoption. Oops. Okay. So I just briefly you'll hear a little bit about Western Lane Fire and EMS Authority. And so I'm throwing in this third entity, this third agency to you. And it's important. And I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with what that entity, that new agency is. So in 2019, October 2019, both SVFR and Western Lane Ambulance District established Western Lane Fire and EMS Authority, and that was to provide administrative oversight to both agencies. So when I was hired by the fire department, and then Western Lane Ambulance District paid part of my salary to SVFR, and then I served as the EMS chief for Western Lane Ambulance District. Which was fine. It was working okay, but then they decided to form an authority, and we moved all administrative personnel. So Dina's in there with me. Matt House, my operations chief, is in there, and then all administrative staff are also in WLFEA. So we provide administrative oversight to SVFR and Western Lane Ambulance District. We prepare the budgets for both. We run those agencies. Now we have the SVFR Board of Directors. They still exist, and they run SVFR essentially. Western Lane Ambulance District Board of Directors run Western Lane Ambulance District, of course. And then we took 2 directors from each of the agencies, both 2 from SVFR and 2 from Western Lane Ambulance District, and they joined together to form the WLFEA Board of Directors. And hopefully I'm not confusing anybody. It works out well. It is pretty simple. But you will hear WLFEA. WLFEA is not a taxing district. WLFEA does not have a budget committee. Our budget revenue comes from the parent districts. Excuse me, I'm getting all tangled up here. Comes through the parent districts. But we don't have our own budget committee. But then, yeah, so when you look at it from the budget sort of organizational chart, we have the SVFR and Western Lane budget committees who advise Western Lane Board of Directors, and then they have a final say as to the WLFEA budget. And last year, why this is important? Well, last year we came up with a WLFEA budget. We went to both boards, and they each board adopted a different budget for WLFEA. So they wanted to share the costs, but they were sharing different amounts. So we had to go back to the WLFEA board and say, you have to come up with a compromise. And they did come up with a compromise budget. Then we had to go back to the boards, and they approved that. So we did it a little bit differently this year. We went to the WLFEA board and said, get us a compromise budget now. And so we did that. We developed a WLFEA budget. Again, that's just administrative staff. Showed that to the board of directors, and they said, oh, it's okay, it looks okay now. And that's the budget you will see now in the SVFR and the Western Lane Budget Committee meetings is a WLFEA budget that the board has looked at. They've approved, but it's still up to the budget committee to give their approval. So you guys will have every right and opportunity to change it if you wish, and then it would just go back to the board and they can change it as well. So that is what Western Lane Fire and EMS Authority, you hear us we'll say WLFEA just to make it short. You'll be hearing more about that in the community. We're really excited how this is functioning. It's really made us more efficient, I think, as we bring our 2 agencies closer together. So it's really working well. So our first meeting, and that's and we'll talk about the schedule, but it's April 8th for Western Lane Ambulance District and April 15th for SVFR. And we'll talk about that, the schedule a little bit later. But chairperson will be elected. Again, that can be anybody. Committee receives the budget message. And what the budget message is it's several pages, 5-6 pages, where you'll get an oversight of how we feel things are progressing budget-wise for the districts or financially. If we foresee any potential dangers coming up, so for like last year, in the budget message I had, we were worried about the impact of COVID on our tax revenue. And it turned out that we haven't seen any impact on tax revenue, so that's good. But we were concerned about it at the time. For Western Lane Ambulance District, we were concerned what would be the impact of COVID-19 on our transport revenue, which is a large part of our revenue for the ambulance district. And again, we saw no impact on our transport revenue. In fact, last year we set an all-time high with transport revenue, and it looks like we're going to break it this year. So I don't know if that was a positive impact of COVID, and that's possible, but we didn't see a negative impact. And then for both districts, another concern for us was we were in labor negotiations. So both Western Lane Ambulance District and SVR, Siuslaw Valley Fire and Rescue, are represented by unions. The career personnel are. And we were in labor negotiations with both. And those labor negotiations took a long time, and they were really drawn out. But we have finalized the agreements, the contracts with both agencies, so that's not going to be a concern in next year anymore. And that helps. It fixes a lot of our costs. We know what our costs are going in, and they're set by contract, so that's easy. So, and that'll all be in the budget message. And I'm still working on the budget message. I can't think of a lot of things that are financially worrying for us next year, but I'll come up with some, I believe. And then we'll receive the proposed budget. You'll probably receive all this earlier in the week, so you'll have time to review that. We certainly have to get it to you for the budget meeting, the first meeting, but we're almost ready to go with the Western Lane budget, well, with both budgets. We're just finalizing a few things, and I do have to finalize the budget messages for both districts. But you'll have that. Once we give it to you, then it's a public document, so we'll publish it on our website and post it, and anybody can see it. And of course, that's fine. That's what it's there for. We'll set some dates for future meetings, and I'll have a calendar coming up. We'll adopt rules of orders for the meetings, and typically we use Robert's Rules of Order. I usually have Robert's Rules, a booklet on my desk, and that's how we'll run the meetings, and that's just typical. And then we'll review the proposed budget. We'll go over it line by line. You can ask any questions you want. We'll explain why things went up, why things went down, why we put things in places that we did. It's going to be a little different for RJ and Marvin. I know you remember how the budgets looked last year. The format's going to be a little bit different. It's much easier to understand. We're going to what the state has asked or has provided for templates, and I really like it. I know Dina likes it. They're much easier to look at and to see things in. So it'll be a little bit different format, but I think you'll all agree after you see it that it's much easier to read and go through. And then, of course, we'll receive public comments on the proposed budget. We'll have a couple opportunities for the public at large to comment. And then what happens later? If there are subsequent meetings, and there doesn't have to be subsequent meetings. I know last year there was several meetings for Western Lane Ambulance District, and that's fine. SVFR, they were happy with the budget proposed, and they approved it at the first meeting, which was nice. So that's what we're striving to do. We would like that everybody would be happy with the budget. It makes sense. It's clear, and then it can get approved right away. But there's no requirement that has to happen. And if it doesn't happen, that's fine. You'll have additional time to review the budget, and you can visit with us. You can come to the station, and you can call and make an appointment to come talk to me, and my staff has my calendar available. They'll put you in there, or you can just call. You can ask Dina about questions. That's fine. If you have something about a specific item you don't understand, or you'd like more info, all you got to do is call. We'd be happy to provide that information to you. And request additional information. If you think that something needs to be talked about at a future meeting, just let us know. We'll make sure it's on the agenda. Typically, those things are talked about because everybody has, but you may have something, one item that you think needs to be discussed, and that's fine. You have every right to bring that up. Okay, here's some more questions. Can committee members consult with each other about details in the budget other than at budget committee members or meetings, hearings? Sorry. You shouldn't. You shouldn't talk to other budget committee members outside the meeting. You can certainly talk to us because Dina and I, we're not on the budget committee, so you can ask us questions. But when you talk to another budget committee member and it's not in a public meeting, the state frowns on that, and it's borderline illegal if it's not illegal. Their reasoning being that they feel the citizens should not only know your final decisions on a budget, but they want to know the discussions going up. How did you arise at your decision to approve the budget that we come up with? So hold your discussions with budget committee members to the public meeting, and then you can ask any questions you'd like to ask. And one question that comes up quite a lot is, how much detail can the budget committee get into in the budget? And really, there's no set answer. For like example, can a budget committee determine how much an employee is paid? Well, no. The budget committee does not approve new person hiring new people, contracts or salary schedules, but the budget committee does approve what's appropriated for those areas. So, in a sense, yeah, the budget committee does have a say in what people get paid as a group, but then they can't say no. This person should get paid this much. This person should get paid that much. Again, it's just advisory to the directors. Okay. So then, after all the presentations are made, all the inputs received, everything's been discussed, then the budget committee approves the budget. And this could be at the first meeting, it could be at the second meeting. We will have as many meetings as it takes to get a budget approved to make sure everybody's clear on what they're approving. And you see I've got approves highlighted because, again, we're going back to this is an advisory board. And so you're advising the district board, who is also part of the committee, but you're advising the district board that this is a budget that you've approved. And then the board, the governing body of the district, published a financial summary that'll be available to the public. And again, the governing body has the right to make additional adjustments to the budget that came out of the budget committee, and that's part of state law. There are some requirements. If it's more than $5,000 or 10% change, then we have to hold another public hearing. It doesn't go back to the budget committee for reapproval. We just have to have a hearing. That rarely happens because the board is part of the budget committee. So unless something happens in between when the budget committee approves it and when the board adopts it, something financially that we weren't prepared for, but it would be unusual to have a major change like that, and even minor changes. We had minor changes last year. Was it was probably the WLFEA budget, but those weren't large enough to have another public hearing. And then the governing body adopts the budget, and that'll be our final budget. Is the budget that the board of directors adopts. And here's our calendar. And that has there's nine parts of the budget cycle. So first of all, in February, we appointed the budget officer, and that was me. Typically, it's the CEO or in fire departments, ambulance districts, it's the chief of the district. Proposed budgets have been prepared, and we've been working very, very hard. Well, I say we. Dina's been working very, very hard on the budgets, and she's done a great job. And you got to keep in mind, she's got to prepare 2.5, I call it 3 budgets, because we have 3 different agencies. So one budget is tough enough, but she does a fantastic job in preparing all 3. And so we've got those ready to go. Meetings notice has been published, so we're all ready for our first budget meetings coming up. And then here's our calendar. Like I said, April 8th for Western Lane, April 15th for SVFR. No rhyme or reason for who's going first and who's going second. It's just it's probably what we did last year. I don't know. I just put Western Lane first, so we just put those dates. These are all Thursdays. That's typically our meeting night. We like Thursdays. If somebody says, or if some of the committee members say Thursday don't work for us, then we will change it. That's not a problem. We just had to pick a date, so we picked Thursdays. So first meetings 8th and 15th. Then the second meetings are the 29th, April 29th for Western Lane if needed, and May 6th for SVFR if needed. There's nothing on April 22nd because that's our joint board meeting, and we may typically we won't have any budget discussions there unless the budgets have been approved, which could happen, but I'm not sure they will. But that's why you don't see April 22nd in there. And we go into May. If we need additional meetings, we will schedule additional meetings. I'm just going on a best case scenario here. May 27th is our joint board meeting. So if the budgets have been approved by budget committees, we'll take it to the board meetings on May 27th. That will also be a public hearing. They'll open it up for public comment. Any member of the public can comment on our budgets. Then we'll close the public hearing, and the board will vote to either adopt or to modify the budget, or to send it back for further discussion. They have all those options. So the only real deadline we have is July 15th. We have to have submitted our budgets, declared our tax levy, have everything filed and levy certified by July 15th. And if we don't do that, then we don't collect our tax dollars. And I'll show you what the impact of that would be on the districts. It'd be completely devastating for the fire department, and it'd be very devastating for Western Lane Ambulance District as well. But Ambulance District gets transport revenue, so that helps a little bit. But that's our deadline. So if we have to go into June, we go into June. If we have to have daily meetings, we'll schedule daily meetings. But we'll do what we have to do to make sure we have a budget.
So Chief, can I say one quick thing?
Absolutely.
The other deadline we have is the budgets have to be adopted by June 30. And then, because June 30 really is by law when the budget needs to be adopted, the July 15th deadline is for the tax certification. Yeah,
a good point. So in our budget documents, they'll follow a basic format, and there's some different terminology that's different for me. You guys that have been around financial statements, it may all be make common sense to you, but I've had to learn a lot about this. And I was previously fire chief in Washington, and they use different terminology up there, so it's different wherever you go. So typically you'll see expenditures or requirements, and then you'll see revenues and resources, and you will see that in our budget. You'll see different expenditures, typically broken down by fund. And just for my benefit, really, is what's a fund? Well, it's just a fiscal and accounting entity, and I'm not going to go into the whole definition there. But it's just places where we put money, and we call it's where we call where the money is going. So we'll have expenditures and revenues in each fund. Every budget has at least a general fund. And we do have a general fund, and you'll see that. Other types of funds, you could have a debt service fund, you can have a construction fund, you can have a reserve fund, anything that you want to specifically designate some money, you can put that into a fund. It has to have a purpose. You want to do this, you want to build a new fire station. You could start a construction fund or a fire station fund. And then the money that goes in there is designated for that purpose. The board can abolish the fund and take the money out, so it's not lost forever, but it's just they've put it aside. So in our general fund, you will see personnel services, so that includes our salaries and benefits. Benefits would be health care, retirement, and there's payroll taxes as well as wages. So typically that's where most of your money is going to go in any agencies and personnel. Materials and services, so that's contractual, so like attorney fees, materials, hoses, or medical supplies, things like that would be in materials and services. We also pay for WLFEA, so since it's a contract between Western Lane and WLFEA and SVFR and WLFEA, we put the money necessary or that's going to WLFEA into materials and services. So it's a little disconcerting to me because part of that money, in my mind, pays for, well, most of it pays for personnel services in WLFEA, but it's going into materials and services. So years ago, you saw when we first set up WLFEA, we saw a big drop in personnel services for both agencies, but all we had done was switch it to materials service. So we had just taken $1 from here and moved it over there. So there wasn't a big drop. There was some savings, but that was just from sharing people. And you'll see that in our budget. Capital outlay, if you have any capital purchases, so if you're going to acquire some land, some large pieces of equipment, you will see for SVFR, we're planning on hopefully purchasing a new water tender this next year. We're trying to do it this year, but we haven't been able to get the final specifications for a tender, so we're going to push that to next year. So you'll see that as part of our capital outlay. And then unappropriated ending fund balance. This has to do with what we call dry period financing. I know, Marvin, you know all about this, but if Vanessa and Aaron and RJ, you probably heard about this last year. But for those agencies that deal with their primary source of revenue is tax dollars, you run into, and I've got a slide here. I don't know how well you can see that, but I'm showing tax revenue in this gray bar, and that comes in primarily in November, a little bit in December, and then just a slight amount throughout the year. But the vast majority of our tax revenue, of course, that's when you pay your tax bills, are in November. We get it in that time frame. But we have to have money to survive these 5 months until we get our tax revenue in. So we set aside what's called unappropriated ending fund balance, and that's the money we use here. So every year in the budget, you'll see unappropriated ending fund balance, and that will go to pay for the 5 months coming up. It's critical for SVFR because that's our revenue is taxed, comes from property taxes. Western Lane's not as dramatic. They have they get transport revenue each month, and that's about $160,000 a month. So that can go to some of their expenses, although they're still dependent on taxes. So we call this dry period financing, and that's why we need the unappropriated ending fund balance. So continuing with our general fund, you may see a line for debt service. Typically, these agencies don't do that. They could. We may with SVFR, and we are upgrading. And Marvin, you'll be interested to hear this. We have to replace a repeater and replace some stuff up on Herman Peak, and that's about $200,000 worth of equipment. So we may do some debt financing with that. And then you'd see that there. We can transfer between funds, and we do that occasionally. You'll see that. And then contingencies, just for unforeseen expenses. My goal is to have a perfect budget where we have predicted everything, and we know that what it's going to cost, and it costs that much, and we know how much revenue we're going to get to the penny, but we know that doesn't happen. So we have a small amount of contingencies for things that are unforeseen. Last year it was a pretty big contingency because we were right in the middle of labor negotiations. We had no idea were we going to end up with raises, or were they going to take a cut in pay? What were benefits going to be? We had proposed a lot of different things. So once we had the final contract, then we had to go back into contingencies, which was what it was there for. And then we had to do a supplemental budget. So it worked out perfect. But typically we try and keep contingencies fairly low. And this is like in the $100,000, $200,000 range. So a small percentage of the budget. So this is, hopefully you can see that. It's very small on my screen. This is just an example. This is Scappoose Public Library District. So it has nothing to do with fire, but the format's going to be the same. So when you see our budget, you're going to see 2 years on the left of actual, either audited or actual expenses in each category. You'll see what was adopted for the current year. and then you'll see what's proposed. And these two columns will be blank the first time you see it, but you'll see what we proposed. So you'll see if there's any change. So you can see they went from available cash on hand from 110 to 119, 125 to where they're proposing 160. And then if you had a question about that, we can certainly, well, we'd probably talk about it anyway, why that we see these numbers changing. And this is the resource page. This is LB20 form from the state. This has only resources on it, so you're only seeing revenue. Excuse me. And then it would have, and sometimes you'll have, so here refunds and reimbursements, line 12 is a new line. So there was no historical data, and we'll talk about that. And sometimes it'll be the opposite. You'll see we had it 2 years ago, but we haven't had it since, and so that's all normal. And then you'll get your total resources. Here's another example. This is the City of East Cupcake again, which is, this one is fictitious, but this is the requirements or expenditures page, and this is LB30. They've done all there, so they've got personnel services, materials and services, capital outlay, all on one page. We can't do that. Most agencies can't. So our budget is about 10 pages. So personnel services will be a couple, materials and services will be a couple pages, capital, and we do resources and requirements on different pages. So you'll see that in capital. Each fund, so we have for Western Lane Ambulance District, for example, we have a LifeMed fund. So those people that sign up for LifeMed, and hopefully you've heard about LifeMed in the past, if you sign up for LifeMed, we put all that revenue into a fund. We will transfer revenue out of that as we get the revenue into our general fund, but we have that set up so that will have its own page. So this is what you'll see. And I know Marvin and RJ, we didn't have this format, exact format. We had the same personnel services and materials and services, but I think you'll see it's, at least to Dean and I, it's much easier to read, and I think it'll be much easier for the budget committee to read. And then also what's important for the budget committee is to approve the levy rates. And just talk real quick about our levy rates. So each district collects property tax revenue. SVFR has, well, both districts have a permanent levy, and for SVFR it's at $1.5417. So for every $1,000 of assessed value, a property owner will be assessed $1.5417 in taxes. And so our total assessed value for our district, and we're a little over 100 square miles, 1.8, almost $1.9 billion. So if you took that permanent levy times the assessed, you'll get, so district taxes imposed of $2.9 million. We don't collect that much. Some people, a very small percentage, don't pay their taxes. If you pay your taxes in full on November, you get a discount. So it's a little bit less than that, but still a good chunk of change. Western Lane Ambulance District has a permanent levy, and when I say permanent, it can't change. It can go down. It can never go up by law. And these were set. These are Measure 5 and Measure 50. These were set in the 90s, I believe. So these numbers can never go up. They can never be higher than this. It can't go lower. In fact, SVFR was lower for many years. I think when they merged with the city, when the rural fire department merged with City of Florence a couple years back, I think they went down to 80 cents or something along those lines. And it was coming up year to year. But a couple years ago, the board decided to restore it to $1.54 so we could hire some firefighters. And you'll see in the budget that's exactly what we did. So Western Lane has a permanent levy, and theirs is at 0.3198. So almost 32 cents. But they also have a local option levy, and that's where if you need additional tax dollars, you can go to the citizens and ask for approval of a local option levy. It can be as long as 5 years. Can't be longer than that. I think it was almost 10 years ago, Western Lane went out they had a local option levy before, but it was at 25 cents. So they increased it to 45 cents. That's been, so it was originally approved, it's been reapproved, and we'll be going back out in November for additional approval of this 45 cents. So it's just renewal of the local option levy. And you see, so a total of about 76 cents, whereas the fire department's getting $1.54, and that's just shows you the difference. Total assessed value for Western Lane is over 2.2 billion. Western Lane's district is over 1,000, almost 1,000 square miles, so much bigger district than the fire district. Assessed value is fairly close in that City of Florence, of course, has a large influence on our assessed value. And then there's a lot of open space that Western Lane covers. This also includes Mapleton and Swiss Home Deadwood and those small communities upriver that the ambulance district covers as well. So district taxes imposed is about $1.7 million for Western Lane. Again, we're going to receive a little bit less than that. And just you prove this through the revenues. That really doesn't have to do with property tax rates, but just I had nowhere else to put this. But Western Lane receives approximately $2 million in transport revenue annually. It hit $2 million last year. A couple years ago, it was 1.6. So it was 2 million like about 6-7 years ago. So we dropped. We've come back up to 2. I think it's going to hit. It's going to be a little bit higher than 2 this year. I think we're on track for 2.1 million. So that was nice to see that our transport revenue is still staying very strong. So committee has to approve the levy rates for those. So that was my orientation. So this opportunity for questions. Vanessa, Aaron, RJ, Marvin, any questions you might have on you old timers that have been for the budget committee? I mean, I think it goes. Your opinions are valuable, of course, and we take to heart what you guys say, and we appreciate all your efforts. So, questions, anything? Aaron, go ahead.
I feel that this is fairly transparent. I mean, it looks like a regular budget.
Yep, absolutely. And you're more the financial guru, I think, than I am. So, yeah, hopefully it'll all make sense to you. It should. I mean, it's we have to dumb it down for us.
Oh no,
no,
it looks good.
Good.
It was
Yeah.
a good presentation.
Thanks. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, Michael. It was a good orientation. Thank you.
Good. We'll try and do this every year, and again, it'll be recorded. And Vanessa, I know you're running for the board, so if you're running unopposed, so congratulations.
Celebrate now.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a director orientation too, so we want you guys to hit the ground running, the budget committee or director. So, yeah, I appreciate everybody coming by
Right.
and sitting in.
I think the new format looks good.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot easier to see, and it just to me it seemed it was confusing before, so hopefully it'll be even more transparent. And yeah.
Well,
Very good meeting. Thank you very much. And yes, I am interested in what you're doing up on the mountain with the repeaters. Look forward to the next meetings.
Yeah, we have to replace some of the repeaters, and we're talking about a microwave link between Glenada and Herman Peak, so we can get better upriver coverage. I don't understand a single word I just said, but that's what they're doing. So, but it's expensive. Well, it's sort of expensive.
That's good news. We actually cleared the trees that topped a whole bunch of trees to get a line of sight path from Glenada to Herman probably 12 years ago. I was up there. We hired a tree topper. So that's been in the planning stages for at least 10 years, if not longer.
Yeah, that's about how long things take. Yeah. It should help us up right below Herman Peak too, where we have that dead spot when we're too close. So we're hoping. Yeah.
And the sand dunes. It'll get you better coverage than the sand dunes.
Exactly. So Dina, you got any comments? You do all the work, so.
No, I just put down the numbers. You did a good job, Chief.
Good. Okay, so we'll be so April 8th for Western Lane Ambulance District. And is that a 5 o'clock meeting or 6 o'clock?
Yep, all the budget committee meetings are 5 o'clock. I think
Good.
the notice was actually published yesterday in the Siuslaw News for the Western Lane meeting next week on the 8th. And then the meeting notice for SVFR will be published on April 7th for the 15th, the meeting on the 15th.
And we're planning on budget packets the first of the week, or?
Right, correct. So
Okay.
we'll have the Western Lane budget packet out next Monday the 5th, and the Siuslaw Valley Fire and Rescue on Monday the 12th.
Perfect. So expect that. We'll email that to you. And again, if you look at it and have any questions, you can ask. You can wait until the budget committee meeting, whatever you wish. So if that's no more questions, we will see you guys again in the next couple weeks.
All
Thank
right.
you, Mike.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Yep.